All right, looking at this first one, if you guys want to solve this using factoring, it has to equal 0, so we're going to have to subtract 6 from both sides first. And so it's going to be x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. And then you're going to do your factoring thing, big X or a box, whatever you like to do. It don't matter. You're going to get x plus 1 and x minus 6. That equals 0. Then you take each of those factors, set them equal to 0 to find the two answers that would work. X equals 6 would work, and negative 1. So if you were to plug in 6 to this and 6 to this, then you would get 0. Well, 6 plus 1, what is that? It's 7. And then 6 minus 6 is 0. 7 times 0 is going to be 0, so 6 works. And the same thing would happen if you tested out negative 1. So those are your two answers for that one. The next one, if you guys wanted to solve using the quadratic formula, you still have to have it equal to 0. So it would be x raised to the second power minus 5x minus 6. And then you would have to know what the a is, what the b is, and what the c is. Because if you want to use the quadratic formula, you got to know these numbers. And so let's go over to our quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is all about, it's an extreme story about a negative boy who couldn't decide whether or not he wanted to go to this radical party. So the square boy missed out on 4 awesome chickies. And then he stayed up all night till 2 a.m. playing video games. Write this using parentheses, shall we? We have negative b plus or minus square root of b minus 4ac. So we have 4ac. And then we have all divided by 2a. What's my a? 1. What's my b? Negative 5. We know that because the b is next to the x term. So there's negative 5. That's a 5. What? That's a negative 5 right there. Negative 5 is next to the x term. So negative 5 there. And then my other negative 5 goes right there. And then what's my last one? My c. The c is the one without the x. So we put negative 6. I like to go partying first. Let's go to the radical party. We have negative 5 raised to the second power, which is 25. I'd like to add the opposite, so I know that this is a negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 6 is going to be a positive 24. When I add those two together, I get 49. What is the square root of 49? 7. And that's going to be a 2. That's going to be a 5. Let's rewrite it so it's all pretty like. 5 plus or minus 7 divided by 2. That's 2 answers. We have 5 plus 7 divided by 2. And then 5 minus 7 divided by 2. What is 5 plus 7? 12. What is 12 divided by 2? Oh my goodness, he looks familiar. What is 5 minus 7? Negative 2. And what is negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. Look at our two answers. They're the same. Oh my goodness. The last way we didn't review square roots, right? Okay, so I'm going to do it really fast right now, but then I'm going to do it slower later. All right, so see if you can hang. Now with square roots, this is the only one that you don't have to have it equal to 0. So we can leave it the way it is. The problem is I can't square root this side because this is not a perfect square. That's not a perfect square. So because that's not a perfect square, what we would have to do is we would have to complete the square. What? Well, if you have an x term, this can be a perfect square trinomial. Here, check it out. We would write it like this. X squared minus 5x, and then I would say plus blank. I'm going to add something to it. I don't know yet what it is. Equals 6, and then I'm going to add something to the other side. Okay, I'm going to add something to the left side so that it's a perfect square trinomial. Now, it's not that pretty because this is a 5. And so when I divide 5 by 2, it's going to be a fraction, which kind of stinks. How do you complete the square? Well, you find the perfect square by dividing the b by 2 and then squaring it. The b is next to the x. So we have negative 5 divided by 2, and I had to square it. That would equal 25 over 4. So I would add 25 over 4 to both sides. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side, and I'm allowed to do that because the equation is still true. Now I factor this. Now this is kind of dirty. It looks kind of not fun. But when you guys are used to seeing perfect square trinomials, you know a fast way to factor. And that is like this. X minus, because it says minus. I'm squaring it because it's a perfect square. Now I just have to square root that, which is 5 over 2. That equals 6 plus 25 over 4. 6 with the denominator of 4. What would that be? What is 6 with the denominator of 4? If I put a 4 on the bottom, the top would be 24. And so I'm going to get 29 or 49 over 4 equals x minus 5 over 2 squared. Now, if I lost you with the completing the square, don't worry. We're going to go slower with that later. How do I get rid of this squared? You square root it. So if I square root this side, square root this side, this is what you get. Oh, we need some space. I'm going to get x minus 5 over 2 equals plus or minus the 7 over 2. How come it's plus or minus? It's plus or minus because if I square root both sides inside of an equation, you have to have plus or minus. Here's a better explanation. If I have x squared equals 25, what can x be to give me 25? It could be a 5 and it could be a negative 5. So both positive and negative 5 equals 25. And so if I were to try to solve this guy right here, let's do this. If I were to try to solve this right here, whoops, I would say x equals positive or negative 5. And so I have to do the same thing down here. Because I'm square rooting 49 over 4, I have to put plus or minus. And so now I have plus 5 over 2. Let's add 5 over 2 to both sides. Shall we? We shall. We're going to add 5 over 2 here. Whoops. And we're add 5 over 2 right here. And then we got x equals 7. No, plus or minus 7 over 2. Yay, look, they have common denominators already. Isn't life great? All right, we have a positive 7 over 2 and a negative 7 over 2. This splits off into 2 just like the other one. Remember that, Cameron? 7 over 2 plus 5 over 2. And then we have negative 7 over 2 plus 5 over 2. Let's see what happens here. What is 7 plus 5? What's 7 plus 5? 12 divided by 2? 6. And then what is negative 7 plus 5? Negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. Oh, look, we got the same answers. I'm so surprised.